What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Pro Football Network YouTube channel. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host for today. I am joined by two excellent gentlemen here. That is Ian Cummings, our NFL draft analyst. That is Dalton Miller, our lead NFL analyst here at Pro Football Network. We are ready to run through not all 32 picks, 31 picks of the 2023 first round. Guys, I'm excited for this one. How you doing? How are you surviving? I'll ask Ian first. How are you surviving NFL draft season here, as it seems like this is just the culmination of the work that you've been doing all year. You doing all right?
I mean, I'm doing better after the intro, man. That was high energy, good stuff, man. I'm ready to go now. I'm buzzing. But no, man, it's been great. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, all the work that you do leading up to this season, this is the highlight. This is the Super Bowl coming up, but we've done so much work in the lead up to it that, we know almost everything we need to know. Now it's just kind of synthesizing all that information, right? And kind of figure out what's going to happen. So it's the best time of year. I love it. I'm doing great and happy to be on.
Well, of course, we feel like we start to get a sense of what's going on here and that we know what's coming. And then the NFL draft every single year throws us a loop within the first two picks. It's off the rails.
You learn pretty quickly. No matter how much studying and research you can do, you never know what's going to happen. So that's why at some point you just got to be happy with hanging on for the ride.
100%. Dalton, how are you today?
Fantastic. Obviously, I am not as prepared as Ian Cummings because I didn't get to really jump into these draft prospects until after the Super Bowl. But I have been catching up, getting as many guys in as I can. And I'm just really excited for it to all go and be done with. I'm really excited to see how this first round shakes out. I think that there's a lot of unknowns, particularly with how this class is kind of laid out from a talent perspective. So it'll be interesting to see how we do it here.
Well, I'm definitely in that same boat as you, Dalton, where we hit the end of the Super Bowl and then you start to turn the attention toward these draft prospects, stuff like that. Ian, at this point, I'm sure is like just talking about seventh round prospects in his sleep, like just he's dreaming about these seventh round prospects and stuff like that. But we're gonna get to the first round here. We're gonna get to that in a second. Before we do, want to make sure that you guys, if you're watching this over on YouTube, that you are hitting that like button, that you're hitting that subscribe button. We got a ton more content coming your way here very, very soon, and click that bell to get notified when new content drops. All right, that's at youtube.com/PFN365. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and also drop a comment here if we mess up on a pick for your favorite team. If you like a pick that we make for your favorite team, make sure that you're commenting here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we are going to be doing this mock draft over on the Pro Football Network Mock Draft Simulator. This is absolutely free. You can do an entire 7-round mock draft for your favorite team here in less than 5 minutes. We've got scouting reports. We got video analysis up for a lot of the top 100 picks already. Thanks to these awesome gentlemen here, you can run through this completely free over at profootballnetwork.com/mockdraft. profootballnetwork.com/mockdraft. You're going to see the mock draft simulator here as we go throughout this over on YouTube. Make sure that if you want to get a mock draft in, takes you less than 5 minutes to get one through for your favorite team, and you can read scouting reports on essentially every player that we have in there. It's absolutely phenomenal tool. Make sure you go over there and do that. All right, guys, what we are going to do here, Ian, you are going to take the odd number teams here. Dalton, you have the even number. So we're going to kick it off here. We're going to do no trades. We're just going to do this. We're going to say this right up front. No trades for this mock draft. We will be doing a mock draft later on this month where we will be doing some of those trades. And that, of course, is where things get super chaotic. But I wanted to do no trades for this one because any mock draft that you read out there has trades built in. It has a lot of these trades, and we haven't gone back to the sort of staples at the beginning of the pre-draft process where there's no trades and you get some very, very unique fits and unique players that you haven't talked about, because when there's a trade for a quarterback coming up, then that means that player's off the board. And so in some of these trickle-down effects picks into the teams and stuff like that, we're going to get some very unique fits, and that's the purpose of these mock drafts, is to talk through some of these players and to get to know them in a different and unique way. So, Ian, I'm going to throw this to you first. We've got the Carolina Panthers, of course, up here at number 1 after the trade with the Chicago Bears. Who are you going here at number 1 overall for the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, I'll try and be efficient with this one because we all know it's going to be a quarterback. We all know it's going to be, they've been doing their due diligence with all of them. Will Levis, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. If I had to narrow it down to 2 picks, I would probably narrow it down between Stroud and Richardson for the number 1 pick. I think Richardson gives you the highest ceiling. And I think if you have the infrastructure to develop him right, they have a bridge QB with Andy Dalton. They have Frank Reich. They have a stable offensive line already, and they're starting to add more weapons. I think at that point, that's a safe situation for him to go. Now, my 7-rounder that I released this weekend, I picked Richardson. So for purposes of non-redundancy, I'm going to go with Stroud. I think Stroud is a good athlete. I think he's underrated in that respect. He can still improve at being more comfortable as a creator. We saw bright flashes of it, especially against Georgia. And then you look at the arm, he's got good arm talent, and he's a very good processor over the middle of the field, very accurate, and not just accurate, but situational ball placement is a very big strength of his, and he can layer passes over the middle of the field. I think he can hit the ground running in that Panthers offense, and especially with Reich and those triangle reads, he can dominate the middle of the field. So I love that fit, and I think he has enough upside to warrant that selection at number 1. I'm going CJ Stroud.
I love it. Dalton, did you have something to add there with CJ Stroud?
I love it too. No, I love CJ Stroud, and honestly, I loved everything that Ian said about him. I was just wondering, are we going to pick this how we believe the NFL will look at it, or more towards how we would choose at each of these selections? Because I think that's an important distinction.
It definitely is an important distinction, and one that we probably should have talked about before we got on the air. But let's go with how we think the NFL teams are going to do this, right? And that's something too, where as we're going without any trades here, stuff like that, that will get some of those unique fits and stuff like that. So let's go with how NFL teams will do it here. So we got CJ Stroud at number 1 overall. Ian, I did want to ask you, any consideration there? You said it was between CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. Any consideration there for Bryce Young, right? Because that's one of the things that people are really, really going to hone in on. Bryce Young, absolutely incredible. And we'll talk about him here in just a second for some of these picks, or for some of these later picks. But is that any sort of difference with the trade up and how much Carolina sent away? Because Bryce Young is an outlier at his size. He's an absolute outlier at his size. If you're there at number 1 overall, I think it's fine to take him there. But when you send away multiple first-round picks, you send away DJ Moore to then go up and select that outlier, does that change that equation at all for you?
Yeah, for me, it's not so much about what Bryce Young lacks, because in my opinion, he has the highest floor of the entire class with his elite ability to create and extend plays and kind of keep things under control in chaotic situations. We saw that time and time again this past year. He's incredibly instinctive off script, and I think that ability is very valuable, and it'll help him withstand adversity early on in the NFL. With that said, if you're the number 1 overall pick, you got to shoot for the stars. And I just think Richardson's talent is head and shoulders above anyone in this class. And I do think Stroud offers a better blend of high floor and high ceiling traits than Young. Young is very good. I think he has good arm talent, but I think Stroud is a notch above him there. And then the size as well is a safer element to his profile.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move on to number 2 here overall. The Houston Texans are now on the clock. Dalton, you are managing the Houston Texans here. Are we getting Bryce Young? Are we getting another quarterback? Or we've been throwing some loops here recently with some mock drafts that they bypass quarterback altogether.
Yeah, I don't think that you can bypass quarterback. I think that there's ways that the Houston Texans can continue to build their offensive structure, even, with taking a quarterback here at 2. I do think that they need to make some improvements, but we're going to get another pick with them, and I'm going to get to choose twice for them. I'm really excited about that at 2 and 12. I'm going to help out their offense again at 12, hopefully, and that offense is going to be helped out for Bryce Young. If I can get the 2-pick package that I want, it's going to be fantastic, because I think Bryce Young is the best quarterback in this draft class. The issue is he's 5'10", and not just that he is 5'10", but he's 5'10", and he probably played at like 180, 185 pounds. Yep. He is a small guy overall, and we talked about his instincts. We talk about his ability to just run the offense like it is second nature, but I think the biggest issue with him is that he is creative, and with his creativity comes a propensity to take massive hits. And we've seen him take a bunch of big hits, and we love the toughness to get back up. But at the NFL level, when you're getting hit by NFL talent day in and day out, are you going to be able to hold up that way? I think he'll be okay, but I think when we look at this from an overall perspective, I could see the Texans going with somebody like Richardson. I just think from a mental perspective, with everything that is going on, with a little bit less of a environment for success for somebody like Anthony Richardson early, I think they're going to take the shot on the size outlier instead of going with the massive ceiling with Anthony Richardson. So I do think that Bryce Young will be the pick here, and I honestly believe it's a fantastic pick.
It's really interesting, too, in previous draft classes where we talk about some of these players, these quarterbacks going number 1, number 2 overall, you look at the offensive line situations that they fall into, and you're like, I'm really, really concerned for them having this immediate success. But Ian, you alluded to it with the Carolina Panthers. That offensive line is actually not bad. And the Houston Texans, they're missing 1 or 2 pieces, maybe one at center, but otherwise, like, they're pretty set. You need Kenyon Green to take a step forward, but otherwise, they're pretty set at offensive line. Now, you do have the concerns there with the receiving core after trading away Brandon Cooks. But Dalton, I feel like you might address that here later on in this draft. Let's go to a team that definitely has some issues on the offensive line at number 3 overall and is a prime candidate to trade out of this spot if we were doing trades. Ian, the Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock. Where are you going here?
Yeah, it's tough because you look at the Cardinals roster and there's not a lot of position groups where the talent there would preclude you from taking a player in the first round. I feel like there's a lot of needs they can address here. And I think that, you mentioned it, trading down is an optimal solution for them. In the latest mock draft at PFN, we had them trade down to 7, get Christian Gonzalez at corner, which I think would be a strong choice. But if you're staying put at number 3, I feel like you have to take the only blue chip talent at the premier position of need. That's edge rusher. That's Will Anderson from Alabama. I think on the edge, they have Myjai Sanders and Cameron Thomas from last year's class, who both have, measured upside, but neither player is coming close to precluding you from taking Anderson. Anderson is a blue chip player. The amount to which he can generate power for his frame is insane. Around 6'3", 255, almost 34-inch arms, explosive and run defense. He can both penetrate and hold the line. And he's got violent hands as a pass rusher. He's got good flexibility, lateral agility. I think he's the complete package. And I think if you need, you look at that roster top to bottom, it's just a roster that lacks high-end talent. I think Anderson raises your bar there. I think he's a tone setter on day one.
Any consideration there? We've heard a lot of buzz here recently that Will Anderson, based on college tape, Will Anderson should be the first defender off the board. Jalen Carter was in that conversation. Now some off-the-field stuff has kind of moved him down the board a little bit here. We'll see where he goes in this mock draft. But any consideration here for Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech, who has all the upside in the world with his measurables? Any consideration there for Tyree Wilson going off the board over Will Anderson?
There's got to be a little bit, at least. I feel like the appeal with Wilson is his tools are out of this world, to the point where he's just in a different class entirely. 6'6", around 275, 36-inch arms. That power profile is insane. You don't see a power profile like that very often, and it's something that's very unique to him. You compare him with the other power edges at the top of the board, like Lucas Van Ness and Miles Murphy. They're all very high on my board. And, Wilson, I don't have him as the highest in that group, but I do think Wilson has the most implied versatility with his frame. You can rotate him inside to 3-tech or 4-eye, or you can even stand up outside the tackle and build speed to power. So that power profile is insane, and it's something that not even Anderson has. So you do have to consider it. That said, I think for Jonathan Gannon's scheme, you want to revitalize that defense quickly, and that's something that Anderson can give you, with his high floor and high ceiling traits early on. I think Wilson, he's shown flashes with his hand usage and leverage acquisition, but he still has a ways to go before he's reached that ceiling. So I would go with Anderson just because I think he's safer to go along with the upside, but you do have to consider a guy like Wilson because he's such a rare player overall.
Like we alluded to at the top of this mock draft, the NFL draft will throw us loops, right? And we saw that last year with Trayvon Walker going above Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau, who I didn't have graded anywhere close to those two prospects, but he went number 1 overall because of those tools. So it seems ridiculous to even ask that question, but I would not be shocked at all if we get to draft night and we see Tyree Wilson go above Will Anderson just for that very reason. Dalton, let's go back to you here. Number 4 overall, the Indianapolis Colts. They got Gardner Minshew in town. Is that enough?
No, absolutely not. We can't even front and say that it might be enough. And when it comes down to just Tyree Wilson and Will Anderson here real quick, if Anderson wasn't such a fantastic run defender, maybe we could have a little bit more of a conversation. But for his size, like Ian said, he is a freakishly good run defender. So I think it's a fantastic pick. At number 4, another fantastic pick here, Anthony Richardson. You just saw what Jalen Hurts was able to do in Shane Steichen's offense. He is a vertical passing attack type of offensive coordinator. It is going to use all of Richardson's strengths as a passer to its absolute fullest. I think he's going to be able to grow with that receiving core. They need to figure out the offensive line and make that better. But with that 6'5", 250-pound frame, I think that he's going to be able to create in a way that we saw somebody like Justin Fields do last season. And as bad as it was at times for Justin Fields, there is a hard floor with guys like those two. And I think that floor is much higher than a lot of people would think it is. When we look at Richardson and we look at some of the inaccuracies, his upper body mechanics are fantastic. When you talk to, even guys like Frank Reich, he brought that up. His upper body mechanics are great. He is a natural passer of the football. If he gets that lower half settled down, he's going to be a naturally accurate passer at the next level. I think he's a fantastic player. I think his upside is ridiculous. And we're talking Josh Allen plus level of upside with him. So I think the Colts have to take a huge swing. I think Chris Ballard needs to try to save his job, and that's what he's going to try to do with Anthony Richardson.
It's crazy to think about the rushing output and athleticism that Jalen Hurts brought to the table last year for Philadelphia, and think that it's supercharged. Like, that has the potential to be supercharged with the greatest athlete that we've ever seen enter the NFL at the quarterback position here with Anthony Richardson. Absolutely incredible fit here at number 4 overall. Let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. Ian, you are now on the clock with the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith on a 1-year deal, essentially. Are we looking at Will Levis here, getting 4 quarterbacks off the board within the top 5, or are we looking at a defender here for the Seattle Seahawks?
So I lean defender. I would consider Levis for sure, and especially if Richardson is there, I think that's one you really have to consider for Seattle. Get him behind Smith for a year and then kind of move kind of carry the torch to him. But I'm probably going to go with Tyree Wilson here. I really love the fit. I think he provides that. We talked about the implied alignment versatility that he brings. I would love to see him rush off the line off the same side of Draymond Jones. I think that's a phenomenal combination. 2 guys who are explosive, powerful, the torque from Wilson, to blast through tackles, but then also rotate inside. I think that's a move to, further complete your defensive line. Obviously, after losing Al Woods, you want eyes on a nose tackle potentially in this class too to replace him. But I do think Tyree Wilson provides that explosiveness, that athletic and power upside for you on the line. I think especially for Seattle, they like to move around their fronts. I think it's a perfect fit, and I'm going to take him at 5 overall.
It's really interesting. I've heard you allude to this a couple times in just our interactions of Tyree Wilson potentially kicking inside, right? And that hasn't been talked about a ton here throughout the NFL draft media, but I love that you bring that up because you mentioned 36-inch arms. When we're talking about a player here that we'll draft in a little bit, Peter Skoronski, the offensive tackle out of Northwestern, the concern of his is arm length. And so the solution to that is, even though he's a phenomenal tackle prospect, kick him inside. What are you going to do when you have a player who has 32-inch arms and Tyree Wilson on the inside who can just absolutely detach? You can't do anything. And then with the power that Tyree Wilson has, I love that you bring that to the table because that would be absolutely fascinating to watch, that length being utilized to his advantage on the inside as well. All right, let's go to number 6 overall here, the Detroit Lions. Dalton, you are now on the clock.
Everything worked out perfectly for the ankle biter, the kneecap biter, Dan Campbell here. He made some interesting comments about Jalen Carter a little while back about how he had spoken with a teammate of his, and there was some very interesting conversations that he had with him. I don't think that he brings that up if it is actually a negative on Jalen Carter's side. I think he was trying to play a little bit of chess with these other teams, plant that seed of doubt into Arizona and into Seattle so he could fall to him. He'll be lined up beside Aleem McNeil. He'll be with Aiden Hutchinson. That will be a devastating defensive line. We've seen Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell build the offensive and defensive lines up in Detroit. I don't think they're done yet. They just spent some money on the secondary to improve that. They could be dangerous next season if they nail this draft.
I mean, that is a terrifying young defensive core on that defensive line, right? Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston, who took some steps forward last year, Aleem McNeil, like you mentioned, and then Jalen Carter, who, if we didn't have these off the field concerns, right, the situation that's ongoing for him, if we didn't have that, would be off the board well before this, right? Would be off the board well before this. So if those things check out, off the field, Jalen Carter to the Detroit Lions would be, a massive boost for that defense. Let's go to number 7 overall here. The Las Vegas Raiders are now on the clock. You got Jimmy Garoppolo in town. Ian, is that enough at the quarterback position?
Well, the short answer is no. Now, I do think, if you don't have your guy in this class, if you have to maybe trade up and give up capital, right, that's not as ideal of a situation, right? So I think signing Garoppolo gave the Raiders a situation where they don't have to move up. They're not forced into a corner. You can wait until next year if things don't line up your way. And at number 7, there are some non-quarterbacks that I would consider. I love Christian Gonzalez for them. I think they need more cornerback help. I think that Paris Johnson Jr. could be an option. We've seen that he can move to guard or tackle. He can play left or right, and they have needs across the offensive line. So those are 2 that I would consider. Now, in this mock draft, Will Levis fell to them at number 7 overall. You don't have to trade up for him. He can sit behind Garoppolo for a year. I think the situation is relatively ideal for Levis. Now, you obviously need to keep building talent on that offense, and especially the offensive line, because at Kentucky, we saw he didn't always have enough time to throw and go through his progressions, and he does not handle pressure very consistently. But that said, if you can get a potential franchise quarterback or a guy that has franchise upside at number 7 overall, and he doesn't have to start right away, he's not forced into action, then I think you have to capitalize on that opportunity. So I'm going to go with Will Levis. You keep your capital, you get a potential franchise guy at his maximum ceiling, and he's in a situation where he's not forced into action right away.
The thing that goes along with drafting a rookie quarterback in the top 10 or just a rookie quarterback in general early in the first round is that it resets your clock as a head coach. It resets that timeline where Josh McDaniels, I thought in week 9, 10, 11 last year, this dude was gone. Like I thought it was going to be that quick of a turnaround where Josh McDaniels was going to be fired from the Las Vegas Raiders. But what is the solution to that is taking a quarterback early where it kind of resets, right? It resets that timeline where that pressure is off and you get to develop that guy. You attach your name to that player. So that's something else to consider here where we could easily see Josh McDaniels, instead of going with one of those defensive players who would help the team overall immediately, but it could reset that timeline, give him a little bit more of an opportunity to develop this team here. All right, let's go to the Atlanta Falcons at number 8 overall. Dalton, you are now on the clock.
This one's difficult for me because I still don't think that they have enough weapons. I know that they have just spent the 4th and then the 5th pick in the NFL draft on a wide receiver and then a tight end who is pretty much a wide receiver. I would still like them to get another weapon, another legitimate weapon somewhere. I considered that Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, for me, is the only first-round wide receiver in this draft class. I really enjoy his game overall, but we're not going to go that way. New defensive coordinator coming into town. It is going to look a lot like the New Orleans Saints, including some of the players that are on this defense now. And with that, I think comes big physical outside linebacker and defensive end types. And I think that this is where Lucas Van Ness goes. I'm not personally a massive Lucas Van Ness fan. I think that he's got a long way to go, technically, to become a full-time starter at the NFL level. He wasn't a starter at Iowa. I don't put a lot of stock into that because they play seniors. That's the way that it goes there. He is big. He is incredibly strong. He is very explosive. He just needs to learn a lot of the nuance that goes along with being a professional pass rusher. I think some of his best work is from the interior. If he can slide inside, if he can learn some things from David Onyemata, I really think that he could be a difference maker as a pass rusher on the interior early on. While he continues to learn how to be a pass rusher on the outside. But he's a guy who should be able to defend the run quite well on the edge as an edge setter. And I think that they're going to start to favor that bigger type of defensive end, just like they do in New Orleans.
Ian, is Lucas Van Ness worth that top 10 overall selection?
It's subjective, right? You know, everyone's going to have different evaluations. Yeah. And I will concede the hand usage does need to improve. He's very power dominant right now, but the power profile is very appealing. We talked about it with Wilson. You know, Van Ness is, similarly built. Wilson's a little bit longer, but Van Ness is still 6'5", 272, 34-inch arms. And one thing that I really like about Van Ness's game is for some taller guys, you can struggle to really load your hips and sink your pads and acquire proper leverage. But Van Ness is so natural when it comes to that. Yep. He is so, and that's why one reason why I'm higher on him, because I think that's something that you can easily build off of, right? He can already sink his pads. Now you just got to add some more counters to your game, right? But you have the athleticism, you have that flexibility. And I think that foundation is very appealing, especially when he's only 21 years old. So I think
you get him reps, and get him good coaching, and he could be really dangerous.
We talk about that in football, low man wins, right? And if you can get that leverage with Lucas Van Ness and then you have the power, that offensive tackle or that interior offensive lineman is going for a ride. If Lucas Van Ness gets underneath and gets that leverage, they're going backwards.
And real quick about Van Ness too, we saw in 2021, especially, at 3-tech, he can even create that disruption, right? So this is a guy who has that special alignment versatility for you too. I think that's another very exciting trait of his.
The upside is there. All right, let's go to the number 9 overall selection. The Chicago Bears, after trading down from number 1 overall with the Carolina Panthers, are now on the clock here. Needs everywhere, except linebacker, after how much they spent at linebacker in free agency. So you can at least cross that one off the team needs list. Ian, where are we going here for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of areas where it's like, you can upgrade there. I'm not sure they would spend a first-round pick on it. I zero in on potentially edge if a guy is there that the value lines up with. Offensive tackle is another big one. I think right tackle is one where you can improve. Keep Tevin Jenkins at right guard, where he's shown really bright flashes. I'm going to go with Paris Johnson Jr. here. This has been one of my favorite picks for the Bears. I think, again, we mentioned earlier, he can play left side or right side. He can play offensive tackle or guard. I think there's a solution where, he's already shown that he can adjust positions and thrive off of position change. So I think there's an area where you can move him to right tackle and have him excel. And then we talk about power profiles a lot. You want to watch really fun run blocking tape? Go watch Paris Johnson Jr. I mean, the dude is a road grader, 6'6", over 310 pounds, 36-inch arms, and he is one of the most explosive athletes in this offensive tackle class. He gets off the line with force. He can just pile drive guys into the ground. I love the idea of him being a lead blocker, pulling blocker for Justin Fields on design runs. I think that's a very fun element. But then as a pass protector too, his hands can improve a little bit. He sometimes is a little too wide, sometimes bends at the waist a little bit and leans too much. But I do think the physical traits are there for him to be a very, very good bookend tackle.
You add Paris Johnson to this offensive line, and suddenly that's a really solid starting five. That's a really solid starting five here for this offensive line that just a year ago was absolutely atrocious. You got Braxton Jones on the left side, you got Nate Davis that they signed in free agency going to the left guard, Cody Whitehair back to center, Tevin Jenkins, and then that versatility, though. You get your best five onto the field there with Paris Johnson Jr. and, of course, with Tevin Jenkins, too, bringing some of that versatility as well. Let's go to number 10 overall for the team that has absolutely everything. They've got a number 10 overall selection here in this draft. Dalton, where are we going?
The rich just continue to get richer. The Philadelphia Eagles have a rich history of just having dominant defensive lines, and it's not going to stop now. They obviously already have Hassan Reddick, who had 16.5 sacks, I believe, last year. They had 2 less than the all-time record for sacks, and it might get better because they're going to go out and draft Georgia edge Nolan Smith here with the 10th pick. And this might be a little bit earlier than we are used to seeing Nolan Smith, but every time I watch him play, I'm more and more impressed on his overall game. Now, I don't think that he is up there with Will Anderson as a prospect, but I do believe what he was able to show at Georgia as a pass rusher impressed me more than what I got to see in 2022 from Will Anderson as a pass rusher, just because of the way that they were used. You saw Nolan Smith be able to play, more of that 7 and 9 technique instead of, having to line up as a 4-eye as a 255-pound player like Will Anderson was doing for a lot of the season. But he is a very natural pass rusher. I really like the bend and flexibility that he has in his ankles. His hands are fantastic. He can win inside and out. He's a really smart rusher when it comes to playing games on the defensive line. I just really like him. A lot of 4-year guys don't really end up being this highly regarded, but he's a fantastic athlete as well, as we saw from the combine testing. So I'm just really excited about him as a player, and to add him on the opposite side of Hassan Reddick, somebody who is being comped to anyways. And then you have Josh Sweat as well coming off of the edge. 1 more year on his contract left. Maybe they don't end up paying him because they have Nolan Smith.
This is the analysis that you get here at Pro Football Network, is that we barely mentioned the fact that Nolan Smith absolutely obliterated the combine. That was not the crux of the argument. The crux of the argument was everything that we saw on tape. That's what you get here at Pro Football Network. All right, let's go to number 11 overall. Ian, where are we going here with the Tennessee Titans?
This is a tough one, man. And the Titans have been doing their due diligence with quarterbacks as well. I know they're hosting Will Levis on a visit. You want to be open to all possibilities. Like if he falls to 11, me personally, I don't think any of the top 4 get out of the top 10. I think that's just the QB tax, especially with guys with this kind of upside. But the fact of the matter is you still have a long-term need at quarterback where you might be looking at a guy in the 2024 NFL draft, right? Malik Willis is reportedly fallen out of favor. Ryan Tannehill, we kind of know what he is, right? You need to upgrade there. So I think you need to have eyes on the future for the Titans. And you could go with the defensive lineman if one falls, but I look to the offense, either offensive tackle or wide receiver. For me, they signed Andre Dillard in free agency. I don't think he precludes you from taking a tackle up top. I think Broderick Jones could be in consideration here. But I'm going to go with wide receiver, and I hate being repetitive like this. I just mocked him there this weekend, but Jackson Smith-Njigba for me is a really good compliment to Treylon Burks. I think Treylon Burks, has wide receiver 1 traits for you, and I know Dalton was planning to take him at 12. So
yep, he was 100%. I was watching Dalton's face the entire time. He's pissed right now.
I feel bad, man. That's the cost of doing business, though. It's Jackson Smith-Njigba, man. I'm going to go with that 11 overall. Now, I have him as my wide receiver 2. I like the upside with Quentin Johnson a little bit better, but I will concede if you want a guy who's going to be more reliable, it's a bank on the upside, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, can be that target funnel for you. He's just very good agility. I think the stop and start ability, the change of direction is insane with him. But he's also, I don't think he's like overly explosive, but his cylindrical twitch, within his cylinder, right? He's so sudden within his body that he can,
Yeah.
offset guys with subtle movements and stuff like that. So I love that ability. And then at the catch point too, very natural contortionist. He's got very strong hands, very strong instincts. I think at the catch and separating, two very strong traits of his. And then he's a slippery run after catch threat too. So I think getting a compliment to Treylon Burks, who is high upside, but still raw, still developing, getting a guy who can come in right away and be that target funnel for you, very valuable for whoever your quarterback is, whether it's Tannehill, Willis, or a 2024 guy. I feel like getting that supporting cast is very key. So JSN, number 11 to the Titans.
One of the fascinating storylines going into this NFL draft is going to be the San Francisco 49ers quarterback situation and what happens there with Trey Lance. And based on, context and conversations with John Lynch at the NFL owners meeting, it sounds like he legitimately might be out on Trey Lance. Like they might just be moving forward with Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold. And so the instant connection there is Rand Carthon coming over from the San Francisco organization now as the general manager of the Tennessee Titans. That could be a situation where we get Trey Lance over to Tennessee on draft night or something like that. And if that is the case, it's not going to take the number 11 overall pick to get him. You load up that wide receiving core to be able to help him hit the ground running there. And still, of course, only 22 years old for Trey Lance. The upside is absolutely there. So adding that wide receiver core, no matter who your quarterback is, whether it's Ryan Tannehill or whether it's going to be Trey Lance for the future, or if they go with Malik Willis, highly unlikely, but if they go with him, you got to add some receiving talent there. All right, let's go to number 12 overall. Dalton, how you doing over there?
I had to go to plan B. I'm not very excited about having to go to plan B. I love the idea of Trey Lance in Tennessee. I think that if they continue to run that organization the way that they want to run it, kind of zigging as everyone else zags, a run-first team that is going to use a lot of heavier personnel groupings and live off of play action, I think is fantastic for somebody like Trey Lance. For the Texans, things get interesting here because I really, really wanted JSN a lot.
I could tell he looked legit angry when he came off the board.
I was a little bit angry, and the Houston Texans are a little bit angry as well. But what I will say is they are about to have, and D'Amico Ryans is about to have the best cornerback group that he has ever had, because he is drafting a cornerback here. Listen, I think it's going to be Christian Gonzalez, and I feel like it's a good idea for the NFL to take Christian Gonzalez. I am a huge Devin Witherspoon fan myself. I think for D'Amico Ryans and that more zone-heavy scheme, I think Christian Gonzalez is a fantastic fit here. He has all of the size you want to. He really reminds me of somebody who could have really thrived in that old school Seattle cover 3. But he's somebody who I think is intelligent enough and somebody who I think is twitchy enough to live in this new modern corners-based coverage scheme. You see a lot of cover 3 mix-up when it comes to the way that D'Amico Ryans runs stuff. And there's a lot of cover 3 buzz. He starts from too high, goes to a single high, middle of the field closed. I think it's a good fit for Christian Gonzalez. Even though I wanted to go offense here and help out the rookie quarterback, we'll help him out by adding to the defense.
And that's still something too. JSN off the board here, but they do have still a ton of picks in this draft class, right? And so you can, at the top of the second round, you can easily come back around and get a wide receiver there that may have fallen out of the first round. And like you mentioned, Dalton, JSN's the only one with a first round grade, but that doesn't mean necessarily that there aren't other talented players at the wide receiver position here in this class. So that thought of Christian Gonzalez and Derek Stingley Jr. as a young corner duo in Houston is absolutely terrifying, especially with D'Amico Ryans. Let's go to number 13 overall. The New York Jets are now on the clock.
There's one position for the Jets that I isolate as a premier need that where the talent may also line up for them at number 13, and that's offensive tackle. You have Mekhi Becton, who's reportedly looking better, right? But still not sure if he's a long-term solution for you. You still have Dwayne Brown on the roster, but he's a veteran. He's a stopgap, right? I do think that you need to upgrade there, whether that's number 13, or in round 2. But I think, especially for this tackle class, the value kind of dips a little quicker as you go further down the board. So you don't want to wait too long. I think if you're the Jets, you have that 13th overall pick, especially with Aaron Rodgers coming in and then a young quarterback soon to come in after him and succeed him. I feel like it really makes sense to shore up that tackle group right up front. So I mocked Darnell Wright to them at 13th overall. In my mock draft, I'm going to go with Broderick Jones here from Georgia. I think that Broderick Jones isn't quite as refined with his hands and pass protection. He gets a little too wide sometimes, but I do think the flashes of athleticism on his kick out, he can match guys very well, very, very strong recovery athleticism, and the core strength is insane. When he gets his mitts on you, it's over, right? So I think Broderick Jones, and he's got that combination of natural leverage and proportional length that I really like too. He's got to refine his game, but he has the tools to do it. And as a run blocker, you've seen the highlights. I mean, out in space, this guy's a homing missile, right? He'll drive guys into the dirt. So I think that, whether you put him in a left tackle or move him to right tackle, he has shown that he can move to right tackle in a pinch during game situations. He didn't have a ton of reps there, but he did slide out there occasionally when there was an injury, when someone was kind of gassed a little bit. So I do think he has the ability to move around. And if you can develop him, maybe let him sit behind Brown for a little bit. But once he reaches his ceiling, he can be a very, very good player.
And it's scary to think about, too, if you do get Mekhi Becton bouncing back to form. I mean, Broderick Jones is your swing tackle, or Mekhi Becton is your swing tackle, right? Your sixth offensive lineman on goal line packages. That's absolutely terrifying to think about. Let's go to number 14 overall, the New England Patriots here. I feel like they could go 1,000 different directions, and I have absolutely, trying to pinpoint what the New England Patriots are going to do in the NFL draft is just one of the most difficult things to do in this industry. So, Dalton, good luck. Number 14 overall.
Yeah, listen, it's Bill. Bill does whatever Bill wants to do, and we don't have any say over what he does. He doesn't care what we think of him. He is very much an old man yelling at the clouds at this point. I just can't see him even glancing over at tape of Devin Witherspoon in press man coverage and not drafting him. It doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't do that. And I know that he's only 180 pounds, but it doesn't matter to me because everything that I saw in my notes was physicality. It is there. That is one of my favorite parts of his game. And he is already a gnat. He is already a lockdown type of guy in man coverage. With that said, though, that's not the way that they're going. They're not going to draft the guy that they should draft because they're going to go and do what we say they shouldn't do. And they're going to draft Bijan Robinson here because it's Bill Belichick, because he doesn't care about what you think about running back value. He is going to build this offense around the run game. He's going to build it back up the way that it was when Josh McDaniels was around, using running backs in the passing attack. We've already seen what they're able to do with what they have at running back. Now they're going to add another blue chip talent to the mix. It's going to go down very, very poorly for a while. But once he gets on the field, they're going to understand this is one of the best players in this draft class. And that's why Bill is going out and doing this, because he is going to be a difference maker, even if it is only for 5 years and you're not going to leave him for a second contract. If you can get that 5 years out of him at the level we believe he's going to play, it's worth it.
Especially, too, when you look at the constant conversation right now around Mac Jones and whether he's going to be there, whether he's going to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots next year. It could very well be Bailey Zappi. It could very well be Anthony Richardson, because they move up in this draft and they just go and take a swing for the fences, right? We have no idea what New England is going to do in the NFL draft. And I love that you threw a little bit of a curveball here. If you don't have that quarterback certainty, lean on the run game. And we know that Bill Belichick loves to do that. So Bijan Robinson to the New England Patriots at 14 overall does make a ton of sense. Let's go to 15 overall. The Green Bay Packers going to have Jordan Love, most likely. Jordan Love as the starting quarterback in 2023. Ian, where are we going here for the Green Bay Packers?
Packers are always a tough one to mock for because I think there's a number of ways they could go in round one. I think tackle, especially if the value is there enough. I think they've shown interest in Darnell Wright, so that could be one, get him at right tackle. That said, I think one thing that they've shown in recent years is that they are very fond of that big edge mold. Guys who are 6'4 plus, 260 plus, guys who can drive back with power, but also have the athleticism to play in space. And to me, there's one guy on the board who still kind of fits that mold to the highest degree. And I think that's Myles Murphy of Clemson. I think Myles Murphy, we saw the pro day results, right? 6'5", 269, right? 4.51 speed. This is a guy who, he doesn't always get to show it, but I think off the edge, you do see the glimpses of high energy athleticism. He's got very, very fast foot speed off the line for his size. I think he can still refine his ability, past the power rushing, right? But even with that power element too, he's very good at kind of widening his rushing angle off the line, getting tackles to overset and then just barreling right into their chest and kind of smoldering through. And then he's flashed the ability to stack rip moves on top of that too. So I think, there's still room for consistency with him, but I love the athleticism and the size combination. And I think at this point, that's something that Green Bay would really gravitate towards. So you could go tackle too, but I'm going to go with Myles Murphy, edge 15 overall for the Packers.
Really quick before we move off the Packers, any consideration for Quentin Johnston, right? It's been something where we talk about it, like they should draft a wide receiver in the first round. They should draft a wide receiver, and they never do. But now that we don't have Aaron Rodgers, assumingly, right? We don't have Aaron Rodgers in town, and you have Jordan Love, and you have Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, like you need other playmakers there, and they love the big-bodied wide receivers, the speed guys over the top, can take the top off the defense. Any consideration there for Quentin Johnston at 15 overall?
I think there would be some, and I think especially for Johnston, he does fit Green Bay's mold at receiver. You know, around 6'3", 206 pounds, over 33-inch arms, and then he's really, really explosive too. The 40 wasn't as impressive as people were hoping, right? But I think high 4.4s is fine for a guy, especially with him, who has the kind of burst that he does. And I feel like his 60-yard speed is better than his 40-yard speed. I mean, this is a guy who, you know, when you give him space to really open up his strides, that's when he can make you pay for it. But then at the same time, you see those comeback routes where he can just chop his stems with 2 or 3 steps and flatten, you know, sink his hips just on a dime, right? You know, he has insane flexibility and lateral twitch for his size, and those are really important route running building blocks. That's why I'm a little bit higher on him. You know, even if he can have room to refine his catching technique in particular, right, and kind of expand his route tree, I think he does have the building blocks to succeed for the Packers. I think you'd have to consider it, right? But I also think the heightened risk with him could cause him to slip down the board on draft night. So that's why right here, I think for the Packers in particular, they may be looking at guys like Jonathan Mingo or Rashee Rice on day 2, right? Maybe we can get better value there. So I think they go with the edge position here, that premier position, but you do have to consider Johnston because he fits their thresholds.
All right, let's move on to 16 overall. The Washington Commanders are now on the clock. Dalton, where are we going here?
Yeah, I love that pick. It's not one that I've seen all that often, but I love Myles Murphy there. And Quentin Johnston actually does make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion. I kind of liken him to Laviska Shenault, somebody who, big physical guy who can catch the ball right at the line of scrimmage. And that would make things a little bit easier for Jordan Love as he develops. But number 16, we need some secondary here as the one downside to this Washington defense last year, I think. They have some young guys who have shown, you know, bits and pieces here and there, but I think adding a guy like Joey Porter Jr. here, I think he really fits the mold in Washington really well. I prefer Witherspoon, but I think that Joey Porter Jr., the size, the physicality, I think that he'll be able to grow in that Washington defense. I think having that defensive line to really make things difficult for opposing offensive lines makes his job a little bit easier. And I think that that's kind of the mold that they would go for as a corner in Washington.
I love Joey Porter Jr. It was one of the things watching his tape. You just see, like, we use that phrase, like, arms like vines. Like, we use that a ton, and I think we overuse it a little bit. But watching Joey Porter's tape in the All-22, I was like, oh my goodness, this guy's arms are legitimately insane. And then he shows up to the combine. I forget what the actual measurement was.
He was 34,
It's insane, right? And so you see that ability to be able to reroute wide receivers at the line of scrimmage. I think that he would be an excellent addition there to that Washington defense. Let's go 17 overall, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably a team that would absolutely love to select Joey Porter Jr. there. Are we going defense here on at number 17 overall?
God, Dalton's put me in a tough spot, man, because I was really expecting Witherspoon to be the pick there for Washington, and now he's on the board for the Steelers, man. I mean, for purposes of clarity, too, the Steelers have Akella Witherspoon. I don't want 2 Witherspoons in the secondary. That's going to get confusing. But no, I mean, he's a talented player. He's a talented player. I don't know if he hits the length thresholds that the Steelers have generally preferred on the outside, and so that's one reason that maybe I wouldn't consider him. I narrow it down to 2 players for the Steelers. You got Witherspoon, you know, who even if he doesn't hit those thresholds, they signed Levi Wallace in the offseason last year too. And he's a guy who's a little bit lighter, a little bit wiry, but he still plays physical. Yeah, a little bit, right?
166 pounds. A
lot of it,
like
man.
that. That's Emmanuel Forbes.
So you're
size.
going Emmanuel Forbes here.
Exactly, right. No. But I think, you know, he kind of showed that they are willing to go against the grain with their own preferences a little bit, and especially if the value lines up. So I haven't even decided yet. That's why I'm rambling, because the other guy is Darnell Wright of Tennessee. You know, this is a right tackle who I've mocked to New York. I think he's a phenomenal value here, and I think, you know, his athletic testing at the NFL Combine. This is a guy who's, you know, 6'5", 333, ran a 5-second 40-yard dash. He's got phenomenal short area athleticism to match guys off the line. He's got a violent snatch and trap. I think that, you know, his power in particular, that was one thing that really stood out to me on his 2021 film when I was looking for guys, you know, for the upcoming season. He's playing against Will Anderson at left tackle, and he folds Will Anderson with one arm extension. That torque is just insane for him. So I'm going to lean And this is only because of the depth of the cornerback class. I think if you're Pittsburgh, you can get a very quality guy on day 2. I'm going to go with Darnell Wright here because I think you have Kenny Pickett, you have that young quarterback. You want to give him the proper support. Darnell Wright can slide in right at right tackle, be a high-level starter on day 1. So I'm going Darnell Wright. It's painful. I love Witherspoon, and I think he shouldn't fall too much farther, but I'm going to go with Wright here.
Darnell Wright, for some reason, just seems like a Pittsburgh Steeler to me. Like, he just absolutely seems like a Pittsburgh Steeler. So I feel like that's one of the ones that we can begin to write in Sharpie at this point. All right, 18 overall. The Detroit Lions at number 6 overall. They got Jalen Carter. You've got the duos here. You got the Houston Texans with the 2 first-round picks, and then you get to make both selections here for the Detroit Lions. Number 18 overall. Where are we going here?
Yeah, I love it because I love D'Amico Ryans, and I love the Detroit Lions. I'm not a Detroit Lions fan per se, but I absolutely adore that fan base for sticking around for so long. You guys are fantastic, and I'm going to give them exactly what they want here, exactly what they need here, and that is another outside corner. And I know what you're saying, Dalton. They just got Emmanuel Mosley. He's a really good player. He's coming off of an ACL. He's on a 1-year deal. Jeff Okudah has been good. You know, last year he was better, but he's been up or down. You're going to have to decide to pay him here soon. Cam Sutton, a fantastic pickup for them. He is going to patrol the slot for them. Get your other outside guy. And my favorite fit of any team and any player is Maryland corner Deonte Banks being with Dan Campbell. Yep. Because Deonte Banks wants to punch you in the mouth. And that is exactly the type of player that Dan Campbell loves. One thing that I would like to point out just for the Steelers real quick, they love Keely Ringo. They love him. It's been reported heavily. I don't think they should do it, but that was something I wanted to bring up. The Lions don't go with Ringo. The Lions go with Deonte Banks, who I think is a perfect fit for that cover 3, cover 1 type of hybrid that they play there. There's obviously more that goes on to that defense than just those 2 coverages, but I think he's a perfect fit for playing off and coming forward or playing right up in people's faces and punching them in the mouth.
One of my favorite clips, and at this time of year, you just see, you know, little snippets and highlights and stuff like that consistently get posted to Twitter and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. By far, my favorite clip of any prospect is the press against, I can't remember which team they're playing, but this wide receiver tries to get off the line of scrimmage, and Deonte Banks just says absolutely not. No way, shape, and form. And he pushes him backwards. The wide receiver goes backwards. I can't remember seeing that ever. So Deonte Banks, one of those guys, you're absolutely correct. Fits Dan Campbell's ideology of a corner to a T. Let's go 19 overall here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to try to make it work with Baker Mayfield on at the quarterback position this year. Where are we going here in 19 overall?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because Hendon Hooker, there's been way too much smoke for it to not be, you know, a completely warrantless thing that he's being considered round 1. Would I do it in round 1? No, not even close. But I do think, you know, there's too much smoke. You know, teams are meeting with him, and the Buccaneers have met with him, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, especially at the quarterback position, a lot of it is mental. You know, does he have the mental traits that we want to build up at the next level? That said, I think getting Baker Mayfield in that room, I think that provides you a little short-term stability, if that's what you can call it, right? But I think the Buccaneers, they're probably not going to be competing this year. And I think if you have Baker Mayfield, you can ideally be put in a situation next year where you have a strong QB class, maybe get one of those guys. That's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to be future-minded, and I'm going to go with offensive tackle. They released Donovan Smith. Tristan Wirfs is still on the right side, but you need a left tackle here, and I look at Anton Harrison from Oklahoma. This one guy that I'm very high on. I'm going to take him at 19. I think Anton Harrison has the length and size that you want, 6'4", around 315, over, I think almost 34, over 34-inch arms. So again, he's got that natural leverage, proportional length. He's a powerful run blocker. And then in pass protection, he has shown very, very bright flashes of hand replacement. You know, he's got combative hands, independent hands, and he's got very fast feet too. So I think Anton Harrison, you know, the consistency can still be at a little bit higher level, but this is a guy that's, I think, very underrated in the tackle class. He's my OC2. I think if you get him at 19th overall here, you have to take that chance. And I think especially for the future of that quarterback position, getting that solidity at the tackle position is big.
Well, even too, I mean, if you're going to make the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are caught in between right now. They're caught in between of a rebuild and a reset with Tom Brady leaving, but then also like the roster is really, really good on paper. Like you still have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin on the offensive side of the ball. You still have a ton of playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. So it's like that roster is too talented to completely bottom out and put yourself into the conversation of Caleb Williams and Drake May for 2024 at the quarterback position. So at least, like, if you're going to try to compete this year, do everything you can to set Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, whichever one is going to be the starting quarterback. I think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. Set them up for success, and that means giving him some solid pass protection. That offensive line, on paper, when they're healthy, is pretty good. You do have that gap there at left tackle with Donovan Smith. I feel like that is an excellent selection there at 19 overall. Let's go 20 overall here. At number 5, the Seattle Seahawks went with Tyree Wilson. At number 20 overall, they're back on the clock. Dalton, where are we going here?
There's a bunch of ways they could go here. Obviously, we talked about quarterback at number 5 for them. We could be talking about quarterback at number 20 for them as well, with Hendon Hooker still being on the board, obviously coming off of the ACL and being 25 years old. It makes things a little bit more complicated, especially because of that offense at Tennessee. But he could definitely be one of the picks here. I wasn't expecting this guy to still be on the board here right now, so it has made me think Peter Skoronski might be the pick here. He would obviously move from offensive tackle most likely into the interior. But I personally believe that he could be this generation's version of Zach Martin. That's how good I think this dude could be on the interior. I think that is how good he could be. And so he might be the pick here. I've also thought about Boston College legend Zay Flowers here. They really need a third wide receiver. They drafted D. Eskridge, who is miniature. So I don't think that they would be too pushed away by his size. I think that they would go for it if they really wanted him. But I think having a player like Peter Skoronski still on the board here, you can really set that offensive line down, and then you would still have your quarterback for the next few years. They also pick at 37 again. They need a second corner. I think corner is going to be very deep still at 37. So Peter Skoronski, let's get that offensive line solidified.
All right, Peter Skoronski off the board there at number 21 or 20 overall. Let's go to 21 overall. The Los Angeles Chargers are on the clock. A spot where I think that if he's still on the board, Bijan Robinson is just a lock at this point, but he's well off the board here thanks to Bill Belichick at 14 overall. Let's go 21 overall. Ian, where are we going for the Chargers?
Yeah, Belichick loves to mess things up like that. That said, I think the Chargers still have a lot of options, and I'm going to go with wide receiver. I mean, there's only been one wide receiver taken so far in this mock, JSN, and I think that's how this draft could go, is where you have one guy up top, then a few fall to the 20s. And I look at, what's the one thing that people have said they really need in the receiving core? Speed, right? You need speed. That's just the one thing. And I think that, out of this batch of top wide receivers, there's two guys that really stand out to me as guys who would give the Chargers what they need: Josh Downs and Zay Flowers. I'm going to go with Zay Flowers here because I think he's a very high energy route runner. He's a guy who can stress you vertically with his spatial manipulation, but at the same time too, he can cut on a dime. His change of direction is very, very strong, very well balanced within transitions too. And then when the ball's in the air, he can improve at, really honing in with his hands, but he's got phenomenal body control and flexibility. So I think Zay Flowers, for me, gives this Chargers offense something that it really needs on the opposite end of Justin Herbert passes. He reminds me a little bit of Santana Moss. I love the dynamic element that he provides, the high energy play style. And, not just that, but the separation and the rack ability too. That rack element is big with him. So I think that Kellen Moore offense, get that speed in there. Zay Flowers provides that dynamic for you.
I'm going to be honest, I did not see that one coming. As you were talking about speed, I was like, all right, let me just draft Jalen Hyatt right here. And there's a complete 180. Did not expect that whatsoever. But it makes a ton of sense, not only just for the speed element and giving Justin Herbert more receiving options, but then also, too, the long term of Keenan Allen. How long is Keenan Allen there, right? Zay Flowers brings that inside-outside versatility as well. So he could be your long-term slot replacement with his skill set as well.
And I got to give a shout-out to Ali Hodgkinson real quick. He's been banging the drum for Zay Flowers for what feels like half a decade or maybe a decade. Maybe 2 decades at this point. So Ali, that's your guy. He's going to the Chargers.
All right, we got number 22 overall, the Baltimore Ravens. You got OBJ in town now. I don't think that that's going to prohibit them from going wide receiver if they wanted to here. But Dalton, where are we going? Number 22 overall, the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, this is where obviously you would love to have JSN drop. I don't think JSN is going to get anywhere near 22, but he'd be a perfect fit for what they already have in Baltimore with Devin Duvernay, with Rashad Bateman, and now with OBJ. I'm going to go on the other side of the ball. There's still a corner that should not be on the board anymore, and he still is on the board. Devin Witherspoon in Baltimore. I think it's a great fit. They over the years with the Wink Martindale defensives have been a very, very man-heavy defense. Things change up a little bit with Mike McDonald, but he can still play whatever you need him to. He is not just a press man corner. He is just a dog in every way, shape, and form. So Baltimore gets a nice shutdown corner at 22.
I think corner definitely has to be a position that they're eyeing there, and Devon Witherspoon still being on the board is absolutely shocking at this point. Let's go 23 overall, the Minnesota Vikings. Ian, where are we going here with Minnesota? I mean, for a team that just, 12, 13 games last year, the 13. Turnover that they have had on their roster and the state of the roster in general is absolutely shocking. So they need to rebuild, and they need to rebuild quickly. Where are they going here?
Yeah. It's tough, man. This is one that I always grapple with, because if you're the Vikings, you don't have a ton of capital to work with this year. You only have 5 picks, if I remember correctly. So it's one of those things where you have to make sure that you're really hitting all your bases in this draft. And I look at, one thing that people point to, something that they really need, especially in offense, is a complementary threat to Justin Jefferson. You need that complementary threat, because last year, he was on a record pace, but defenses were able to double him, really isolate him, and that left them kind of sparse for options at times. So I think you have to go with wide receiver, not go with wide receiver, but heavily consider it if the value falls your way. And I'm going to go with an outside the box pick. I think there's an outcome where he falls out of round 1 entirely, because he's such a polarizing prospect. And you probably know who I'm talking about, Quentin Johnston. I think the risk is very high with him. That said, Wes Phillips, offensive coordinator, he comes from the Rams tree. And what's one thing that the Rams have really valued in recent years? Size at wide receiver. Skoranek, Allen Robinson, they like to invest in guys that are a little bit bigger. And I look at Quentin Johnston, 6'3", 206. He's got the size. He needs to improve his hand technique, but he has the wingspan. I think that if you can teach him, get him some work with the jugs machine, improve there. And then the one thing that Johnston brings that makes his profile special is that short area athleticism and flexibility. You can build him up as a route runner. It's going to be a risky pick for sure, but I think if you can get him to his maximum potential, this is a guy who can really take the pressure off of Jefferson, not just with his verticality, but as a run after catch threat too, because he is so agile for his size. And he can work through arm tackles. I like the upside here. And I think if you're the Vikings, you need to make sure that you invest in this offense in the short term, because you are still in contention. You don't want this window to get extinguished before you put everything in. So Quentin Johnston, 23, high risk, but high upside.
It's definitely something where you watch his tape and you just come away incredibly impressed with that short area quickness. For a player of his size, he should not be as shifty as he is. There is room to develop. You mentioned it earlier when we were talking about him. Like, the building block of a good route runner is there, just not necessarily refined just yet. So Minnesota Vikings add another first round wide receiver from TCU to that wide receiver room. Quentin Johnston off the board there to pair with Jalen Reagor. All right, 24 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now up on the clock. This is a team where, they spent big in free agency last year, and now looking at their roster, there really aren't a ton of needs, like glaring needs. You can upgrade, sure, but not a ton of places that they really, really need to improve on. So I will throw it to you, Dalton. 24 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I have a ton of trouble mocking for the Jacksonville Jaguars right now, because what did they really lack last year was the ability to get to the passer. They have the names, though. They have Josh Allen. They just drafted Trayvon Walker. What do you do there? Do you add another guy on the outside who can kind of be an outside linebacker, and do you move Trayvon Walker in to play more of a 4-eye role? Play, that Roy Robertson Harris role. Instead, he's a big physical guy. He could do it, but you want to use his athleticism more of a pass rusher, but he's not really there yet from a technical perspective. Where do you go with this? I think that they could upgrade at nickelback or on the outside as well. I've considered guys like Cam Smith. I personally love DJ Turner from Michigan. I think he would be a fine pick here as well. But I'm going to go with edge, and I'm going to just try to load up on this defensive line. I'm going to try to rush the passer, and I'm going to go with BJ Ojulari here. Obviously, the initial combine testing was not pretty. He was testing with a little bit of a dinged up hamstring. He was coming off of an injury. He improved his numbers a little bit at his pro day, but I don't care. I don't care about any of it because I watched his tape, and he is just as flexible as his brother. He does just as many things as a pass rusher as his brother. And I actually think that he's a little bit more powerful than his brother was coming out. So I am going with BJ Ojulari here. I also considered a little bit outside of the box, if we wanted to keep Trayvon Walker on the outside more, I'm not even going to try to say his name, but the Northwestern edge / defensive lineman.
Edidomiwa Adebawore.
Oh my God. You said that so well. That was fantastic.
I've had practice.
Yes. Yes. I considered him as well, but went with Ojulari instead.
All right, we got 25 overall. The New York Giants are now on the clock. Ian, where are we going here for the Giants?
I'll make this simple. If he's there, Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin, it screams Giants to me. I love what he can do. Flexibility from guard to center. You can play him at either spot, especially Wisconsin this past season. He really showed growth, I think, with his stunt awareness, with his footwork, his leveraging, especially at 6'6". And he's a freak athlete. On the Feldman's Freaks list in the summer, he was reported at having a 1.65 10-yard split, which is insane at that size. I mean, the dude is explosive, but he's smart, intelligent, powerful. I think he has first-round traits. And I think that ultimately, if you can play him at center or guard, you have needs at both spots. If you're the Giants, I say run that card up because you need to give Daniel Jones protection if you're going to invest in him.
Especially, I mean, you got your tackles, Andrew Thomas, Evan Neal. You've got your long-term tackles in place. That interior needed a ton of help last year. So addressing it here in the first round makes a ton of sense. The Dallas Cowboys, Dallas Cowboys.
I love how Dalton ended up with the Cowboys.
I know. We didn't even plan that, but it worked out.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I don't know what to do for Dallas. I mean, I do know what to do for Dallas, and I'm going to do it. They're going to draft, in this case, Steve Avila, the offensive guard from TCU. They absolutely love position flex. He has played 4 out of the 5 offensive line positions at TCU. He has been in Dallas's facility. He is from, obviously, TCU, just down the road. So, I just think all the smoke is going towards him. So I think he's going to be the pick, with guys, on the board at corner. I know that they kind of address the, right now need with corner, but there's going to be more needs. I think somebody, like I said earlier, DJ Turner could be somebody come in, play in the slot immediately, and then eventually move to the outside. I don't think his size is a huge issue. We've also seen guys like Elijah Cansey be an option here. Brian Brees is somebody who can play kind of multiple positions, in my opinion. Played a lot of 3-tech, obviously, for Clemson, but can play a little bit of 5-tech, maybe even play on the outside of that because of his athleticism. And he has a ton of upside. But I think the Dallas Cowboys love to build on the offensive line. And so with the guard and center flexibility, they go Steve Avila.
This is going to be interesting where, we heard early on in the offseason, Jerry Jones, wanting to make a splash on offense particular, right? I wouldn't rule out a wide receiver even after the Brandon Cooks trade, right? Like I wouldn't rule that out, even though you have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and now Brandon Cooks. I still wouldn't rule out a wide receiver here. I wouldn't rule out Bijan Robinson if he somehow gets to this point of the draft, right? I think that keeping an eye on, it would be really interesting. I'm kind of eyeing this, and I'm just going to bookmark this, and I'll come back to it. Kendre Miller, the running back from TCU, just seems like a Dallas Cowboy to me. So that would be really interesting in round 2, round 3, if they go TCU here with the offensive lineman, and then come back in round 2 or 3 and get Kendre Miller there. 27 overall. The Buffalo Bills are now on the clock. Ian, where are we going here?
This is a tough one. I want to pick Brian Brzee. I really want to. I would seriously consider it if I am them. That said, one thing that we know the Bills heavily value on the interior and on the outside is length. They love length. AJ Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau. They kind of went against the grain with Ed Oliver, but after he hasn't quite panned out long term, maybe that scares them away. And Brzee, is interesting because he's 6'6", but he's got under 33-inch arms. So it's one of those things where kind of a contrasting profile for you. I think that may scare them away from a length threshold standpoint. I look at another need that you have is, kind of similar to the Vikings, which is ironic because he used to play for them, but you need to find a complementary threat to Stephon Diggs. Gabriel Davis has that big playability, but not super consistent within that role. I look at the wide receivers left on the board, and I do think Jordan Addison provides something for you there. The size might scare off some teams, and I do think there's a bit of projection there, but I do love his profile as a run after catch threat and a downfield threat with his body control, his ball tracking ability. I'm going to go with Jordan Addison here. I know people have been souring on him a little bit after the non-elite testing. I do think he plays faster than his 40 time. I do think he has the explosiveness that you're looking for. And in open space too, very shifty, just a really cerebral receiver at his size who I think can really produce in all 3 phases.
I think with Jordan Addison, you got to go back to 2021 tape to get a full sense of who he is as a prospect. I think he's better as a deep threat. I think he's better being utilized deep downfield than he was at USC. USC was more so underneath, and we saw his production take a massive hit. But in 2021, with Kenny Pickett, I mean, this was, correct me if I'm wrong, he was the Biletnikoff winner.
Yeah, for sure. This is the guy who, if you give him those jump balls, he can adjust for the football. He can make those plays. So I think for Josh Allen in particular, having the speed to separate and having that ability, it's a big plus.
And that's a scary wide receiver trio of, Stephon Diggs. And people are down on Gabe Davis, but he fits that role really well as they boom or bust wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Like, he fits that role. They wanted him to be something that he wasn't last year. And I think that more so comes from a fantasy football perspective. But, I mean, this guy's good. And now you add in Jordan Addison, and that's potentially, if you're going to compete, if you're going to swing for the fences with Kansas City and with Cincinnati consistently battling for that AFC championship, you got to be able to put points up on the board. And this is a big way to do it with Jordan Addison. Number 28 overall, just talked about him, Cincinnati Bengals, now on the clock.
Bengals are tough. They really, truly are, because they don't have a ton of needs, but the needs that they have are obvious to me. Right tackle, we don't know what's going to happen with Jonah Williams moving forward. We don't know if they're going to trade him, keep him around. We just don't know at this point. So for right now, I'm kind of shying away from that. If Bijan Robinson was here, I would consider it. Jamari Gibbs is fantastic as well, but I would rather wait till round 2 to go after him. Plus, it's such a good running back class. It kind of takes me away from drafting one in round 1. I need Lou Anarumo to have 2 outstanding safeties. And he has one who I believe is going to be an outstanding safety in Dax Hill, somebody who is a kind of, I think, a strong safety in a free safety's body is what I would say.
Sure.
But really, really physical dude, outstanding freak athlete, somebody who could play, in my opinion, on the back end or up front. I'm going to go with another safety. I want him to have 2. Yes, he played in the slot for Alabama. I understand that, but I'm going with Brian Branch because the one thing that I noticed from him is he's an absolute dog. He can play in the slot. I think that he'll be able to play on the back end just as well in a split safety role. I think he can come downhill and play against the run. He likes to hit people. He's really, really good at bringing physicality without it being illegal. And so I'm really excited for this mix because I think Lou Anarumo is one of, if not the best single game defensive coordinators in the NFL. And I'm really excited to see what he can do again with 2 fantastic safeties after losing both of his starters this past year.
Let me go to the NFL draft analyst here. With Brian Branch, this was something that, top 10 consistently in mock drafts at the beginning of this pre-draft process. And now there are a lot of mock drafts that don't even have him in the first round. So, and we get him here at 28 overall, right? It's just very difficult. I think for a lot of people, the talent isn't in question. It's more of the positional value and also team needs. There aren't a ton of teams that really, really need a safety earlier on in the draft. But from a pure tape perspective and talent, what did you see with Brian Branch?
Yeah, I think part of it too is a really niche role for him, right? He played in the slot a lot at Alabama, and that's what people are projecting the next level. And that's something that, at the end of the day, he's a very good player, but how high are you going to take that, right? And I do think the slot is an underrated role in terms of how important it is. And having a guy like Branch who can play that role, Dalton mentioned he's a dog. This guy is physical, very, very willing in run support, but he's also willing to get in your grill off the line and press coverage, right? And he's got phenomenal coverage instincts, playmaking ability. I think from a draft analysis perspective, this is a guy who on my board, he's a top 20 player. I love the ability, and I think the 4.58 40-yard dash time also sour people a little bit. But his game was never predicated on long speed. He's explosive enough, he's twitchy enough in short ranges, and he's not covering the full field very often. So I think ultimately that explosiveness out of breaks and transitions is more important to his game. So I think people get lost in the weeds sometimes, but the fact of the matter is he's a phenomenal football player, also a very good short area athlete. And I think at this point, for the Bengals, you can play him in the slot or you can play him in space. He can do whatever you need him to do because he is instinctive, he is physical, explosive, and he's a playmaker when the ball comes his way. So I think someone's going to get a very good value deal with Brian Branch. It just depends on who has a vision for him.
All right, let's go to 29 overall, the New Orleans Saints. Let me see. Let's find an edge defender that is like 60 overall on our big board, but has tremendous length and athleticism. That's probably who they're going to be selecting here. No, Ian, where are we going here at 29 overall with the New Orleans Saints?
You might have checked my notes here because that's what I was going to do, man. But no, I think, well, first off, let's talk about what they could do. Josh Downs in the slot with that receiving core stands out as a potential option to me personally, especially with Derek Carr. You want to give him the proper weapons to succeed, right? But I I do think, you kind of laid out the script for me. I mean, they surprised everyone with Peyton Turner a couple years back, kind of getting him late in round one. This is a guy who had all the tools. He just needed to put it together. That is a Dennis Allen defensive lineman, and it hasn't quite panned out long term. He's battled injuries. He's struggled to stay consistent. And then they lost Marcus Davenport in free agency. Yep. Cameron Jordan's getting older as well. So I think edge is a position that they look at again in round one, and kind of surprise people. And I'm going to go with the name that isn't always mentioned in round one, is barely ever mentioned in round one. But prepare for it, because Dennis Allen loves his Dennis Allen defensive lineman. And Zach Harrison from Ohio State is that guy. I think Zach Harrison, dude, I mean, this is a guy who he never quite put it together from a consistency standpoint in college football. But this past year was his best year yet, and especially against Jalen Duncan against Maryland in the latter parts of that game. He showed off bend. He showed off power, agility. I mean, active hands around the apex. This is a guy who has all the tools in the world. 6'5", 269, 36-inch arms. He was rumored to run in the 4.4s coming out of high school. I mean, he's an absurd athlete with flexibility for his size, with a very good power profile. He's got to put it all together. But I think if he can be very good. It's a big risk, but I think especially for that profile, that's a Dennis Allen defensive lineman if I've ever seen one. So I think the Saints shock everyone. They take Zach Harrison round one, and it's up to them to make that pick right. But he does have the upside to be considered there, I think.
This is a pick where I'm like really upset with myself that I haven't thought of this before up to this point, but I'm like, this makes complete sense. Yeah. Zach Harrison was definitely rising throughout the college football season and was definitely a name that people were starting to pay attention to. It kind of tailed off towards the end of the season there, but I mean, this makes a ton of sense there. I think a lot of Saints fans are going to be upset with you with making that selection, but it makes a ton of sense. It makes all the sense in the world. Let's go 30 overall. Again, another duo here. You get another duo. They went at 10 overall. They went with Nolan Smith, the edge rusher out of Georgia. Now they're back on the clock here at 30, the Philadelphia Eagles.
I mean, this is just going to happen at this point. They're gonna get lightning to match with thunder. They're going to go with the undersized defensive tackle that runs a 4.6 here. They are going to go with Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh to match up. They've already drafted somebody like him. He wasn't as good of a prospect, but Milton Williams, somebody who has gotten snaps for them as a very undersized defensive tackle. I think that Kalijah Kancey fits a very specific role coming out of college right now. I don't think he'll necessarily be a starter for them, but he doesn't need to be. They have Fletcher Cox. They have Jordan Davis. They are going to mix their fronts up and down from odd front stuff to even front stuff. I think when they get into the even front stuff, when they get into their nickel and dime and they can really just pin their ears back and rush the passer, you are talking about Josh Sweat. You're talking about Hassan Reddick and Nolan Smith now. And now you are adding Kalijah Kancey, somebody who runs a 4.6 on the defensive interior, who can just shoot a gap and beat your offensive linemen. They are just going to remain disgusting on the defensive side of the ball with Sean Desai, and they're going to grab Kancey here at 30.
And I love how that plays off of Jordan Davis too, eating up double teams.
I was just about to say that.
That's perfect.
Yep. Just the vibes and aesthetic of Jordan Davis and Kalijah Kancey standing next to one another on the defensive line. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I absolutely love it. All right, let's go 31 overall. The Kansas City Chiefs to wrap up the first round here of the 2023 NFL Draft. Kansas City on the clock. Where we going?
I'm still not used to there only being 31 picks, man. I wish there was 32.
As I was saying, it was like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it is what it is. But hey, I mean, there's a few guys that I'm considering here. I think, you look at how the board has fallen. Brian Brzee could be a good option for you. Isaiah Foskey, we know they like those big edges, but they signed Charles Omenihu, who brings you versatility and power. So I'm not sure if they go there. Adebawore from Northwestern, we talked about him earlier. I would love the fit here for Kansas City. That said, there's a very pressing need on the offensive side of the ball, and that's right tackle. We know they signed Orlando Brown. He's going to play left tackle for them. And I think that there's a right tackle on the board here who, if you don't take one here, you might not get it at the bottom end of round two. I like Wanye Morris in that range for sure. They might not value him quite as highly. So I look at one guy who has been mocked in round one. I could see the Chiefs being very high on him because he would give you one of the biggest tackle duos in the entire league. And I'm talking about DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. This is a guy who was 6'8", over 350 pounds, over 36-inch arms. He is just a tower on the football field. He is a humongous blocker. Now, there's some leverage issues that come with that, right? He can't always bend his knees enough. Sometimes he's lurching a little bit. I do think he improved a little bit there, but that's something that would cause me trepidation taking him this high. But the fact of the matter is he's so big, sometimes guys just can't get around him because his reach is so long, and run blocking reps too. When he gets his hands on you, he can just drive you away. It's just as simple as that. So there's definitely projection with his size, his degree of size, but I do think, for a team that needs a right tackle, getting a guy like DeJuan Jones who has that, just that rare profile for you, getting him in-house and developing him up. We've seen that the Chiefs can coach up offensive linemen better than anyone, right? So I'm willing to bet they know how to maximize DeJuan Jones. So DeJuan Jones is the pick at 31. The Chiefs get their final piece of the offensive line.
Well, it's interesting, too, because you have Jawan Taylor coming in there at left tackle as that pass protector. And then now you add in DeJuan Jones there as that sort of run blocker, right? Yeah. That develop him as and be able to establish that run game, which did pretty well for them last year with Isaiah Pacheco, right? Take some of that pressure off of Patrick Mahomes. And especially, too, when you have Travis Kelce, but then it's Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, who can't really stay healthy, right? It's a very, very limited wide receiver core there as well. So I think that makes sense, that pairing there of Jawan Taylor and DeJuan Jones. Go ahead, Dalton.
Yeah, and a right side of Trey Smith and DeJuan Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, my
That's
word.
a nasty right side of the offensive line to go with an incredibly athletic rest of the package.
Oh, yeah, that offensive line. I mean, they made a major effort to address that 2 off seasons ago, 3 off seasons ago, whenever it was. And this is just continuing that, right? It makes a ton of sense. All right, that is the first round here of the 2023 NFL Draft, a mock draft here with 2 awesome guys. I feel like we brought you guys such incredible analysis here as we went through this mock draft with 2 of the best in the business. That's Ian Cummings. That is Dalton Miller. If you are still watching here on YouTube, thank you so much for hanging with us throughout all 31 picks here. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell to get notified. Like I said earlier, we have a ton more content coming your way here. Before we get out of here, though, I did want to ask, Ian, anyone here within the first 31 picks that didn't get drafted here that you feel like is kind of a glaring omission? Anyone that you think should have gone here within the top 31 that didn't?
My philosophy is always whoever you pick in round 1, make it right? Like everyone scoffed at Cole Strange going to the Patriots, and he progressed pretty quickly for them. So I think whoever you pick, make it right. I'm not one to say that someone should or shouldn't have been picked. I look at Brian Brzee. I love the disruptive profile that he has. Explosive, super flexible. He's flashed very good hand usage. Adebawore, we talked about him, but being 6'2", 282 pounds with over 34-inch arms and having 4.49 speed, explosiveness, proportional length. Those are tools that I'm willing to bank on as that disruptive 3 tech any day of the week. So those are a couple guys that stand out to me on the defensive line. Isaiah Foskey maybe sneaks in there. I do think, after regressing a little bit, his hips aren't super flexible. Maybe he falls to, day 2. But then the tight ends too, Dalton Kincaid, maybe he sneaks in there. Right. Josh Downs. I'm a big fan of Josh Downs. So, hey, the fact that Jameer Gibbs as well, maybe he sneaks in, but he's a phenomenal modern weapon in the NFL. But quality players are always going to fall to day 2, even day 3. The fact of the matter is find those gems and it can work out well for you. But those are some of the top names for me.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thanks again for watching. Make sure to go over and do your own mock draft here over at profootballnetwork.com/mockdraft. profootballnetwork.com/mockdraft. Absolutely free for you guys. You can make trades. It is an absolutely incredible tool here that you need to check out if you want to run through a mock draft for your favorite team, or go ahead and do all 31 teams like we did. Make sure to share it with us on social media there at PFN365. All right, that'll do it for Ian Cummings and Dalton Miller. I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time.